So, judging by the chat, I can see that you are hearing me fine. That's absolutely great to know. I see people still are joining, which is also great news. So I will wait a bit before actually starting. So let's wait just about a minute or two and then we will be starting, of course. You should be also able to see my slides, and I hope you actually do. The first slide, of course, I mean. And yeah, let me know if for some reason you don't, then I will be thinking about what might possibly go wrong, but it shouldn't be wrong, absolutely. So again, waiting for your comments. While I'm actually preparing for the webinar, also would like to mention that if you, and I hope you will, have some questions, any questions, doesn't really matter, let me know all of them in the Q&A section. That will be the best option, but of course, since there are, well, not that many, I will probably notice the questions in the chat, but that might cause of a slight delay since again, yeah, there's not that less of you. So yeah, Q&A would be a perfect solution. No, it's actually presentation. Let me just figure out why it actually shows you the taskbar. Just a second. So just a second, sorry for the delay. Actually cannot successfully hide. Sorry guys for the delay, PowerPoint a bit misbehaves. So basically it should be fine now. There's a bit of an old instructions, just feel free to ignore them, absolutely. They are not relevant now. Sorry a bit for the delay. I'm not sure why on one screen the taskbar didn't want to hide. Probably want to share your attention also with me. So again, for those who just joined, I want to remind you that in case you have any questions, whatever questions you might have during the slide, during the webinar, about Zabbix, feel free to add them to the Q&A section. That will be the best option. Also, if you would like to receive the slides, as it is already was asked in the Q&A section, feel free to leave your email after. You can send it just to the panelists, and then only I will see it and nobody else, so you can be safe in terms of if you're worrying that somebody might see your email. And of course we will send the slides then in, well, 1 or 2 couple of days basically. Yes, I already see some of you sharing. Thank you. Some of you sharing some kind of hashes. Also interesting. So without further ado, we will start our webinar. Just one more thing. I see there's a question that's not in English, so I would be very grateful since, well, this webinar is expected to be in English, to send all your questions also in English. So let's talk about preprocessing. I'm pretty sure all of you at least once heard of it. If not, probably at least once seen the additional tab in the item creation screen when you create your items called preprocessing. What is it? Have you ever wondered? I hope you do, and you have actually opened it. It basically is something. I would say, an action processing of the value, and not coincidentally, it is named preprocessing. It actually preprocesses the value before it gets to the Zabbix database. Preprocess in such a way to define or execute some specific something specific out of this value, since again we can collect and send to the Zabbix big, enormous values that might contain a lot of additional information inside of them, and we don't need, for example, all maybe the comments, maybe the text that is surrounding the value itself, and we want to get something specific, maybe the precise number, maybe the precise word, maybe we want to actually do something with the number that we are collecting. There's a lot of options, a lot of things we can actually do with the databases itself. And as we see in example here, the main idea, but not obligatory idea, is to use it, for example, in your dependent items. But again, that's absolutely not something as obligated. It's just one of the best approaches, I would say. So let's imagine we have a Zabbix and a host that we monitor, and we collect the data from that host. How usually it happens, we send a request and receive something back. Send another request and receive something back, and this is basically the way how the values are being returned. We request something, we get it back. We do it either through the agent, maybe agent pushes the data, but the main idea is we are doing more to receive more. With the idea of the master item, why shouldn't we save a bit on the traffic, on the requests, on the connection requests that we do, on the values that we request, and make one bigger request, but the one request that will return all the data that we're interested in just one go, and then we will process that data and we'll extract something that we are interested in, something specific, and just let's call it and put it on the shelf that it is relevant for. So how that could look like in the simplest of ways. Let's say we are pre-processing the values that are coming in the usual way, like for each item separately. And what can we do? There are multiple things we can do in terms of pre-processing. We can do a so-called trim. We can do a left trim or a right trim. And well, just as the naming suggests, we basically remove something specific either from the left side, either from the right side of the value that we are retrieving. And as we see in an example, we are getting 12C, and as you understand, you cannot save it just as a numeric value in terms of 12C. We have a character there, a C character. So if we would collect that value without any pre-processing, we would need to create the item as a character, and it would need a bit more space to actually be stored in the database. With the trim, we actually can remove the C from the right and receive just the number, the specific number 12, and save this item, these values of this item to the database as a number, and save quite some space in the long run. With the JSON, we can actually extract the value inside the JSON instead of all the JSON, all the curly brackets, all the quotes, all the semicolons. We would extract just specifically the number by providing the path, the JSON path to that number. And with regular expressions, I'm sure if you have ever heard of them or used them, well, you can just simply provide or write a specific regular expression that will parse the value that is coming in unstructured text, and will return something absolutely specific following the guidance you provided with that expression of your own. And how does that work? Again, just as I named, so basically we are monitoring something, we are retrieving or we are pushing metrics to Zabbix itself, maybe from the database, maybe from the network device, some kind of SNMP check, maybe it's agent, maybe it's a HTTP item, maybe it's a text, maybe it's an HTML code, JSON, XML, doesn't really matter. So we are trying to retrieve it, but we don't want to keep it as it is, and we assign a preprocessing to it. And that means before the end value that we are trying to retrieve will get to the database of Zabbix, to the history tables, it will be preprocessed, and we will get into the database whatever is left after the preprocessing. Of course, if the preprocessing fails and it is not correct, well, then we won't get anything. The item will become unsupported. But if it is correct, well, then we are saving what is left after it into the database. And that's quite critical to remember, since, again, if we, for example, transform something with characters, not only numbers, with preprocessing to actual numbers, we can, again, save it to different history tables that are responsible for the numbers itself. Then we have PSRE examples. So basically the regular expression examples, and we can see some of them. Like, for example, we are retrieving 3 lines, the threads cached, threads connected, threads created from the database status. And we are interested specifically in the number of threads connected. We don't need the wording threads connected. We don't need specifically 2 odd lines. We want just the number to start in the database. And to remember what it is, we can use at least the item naming itself, or if, well, we are quite experienced, at least somehow experienced with Zabbix, we can just type this in the item units with an exclamation mark, the threads connected, and keep 39 in the database. So we will use the regular expression preprocessing step, and we will write specifically threads underscore connected, follow strictly, and then basically any digits that follow, and we will get only 39. If you want to get the version of the database specifically, then it is quite similar, but a bit differently. So we will use the version, again, specifically, precisely the version, and then some spaces. Between the spaces, we will provide the separation line, as you can see it, and then again, any digits only. And that's it. We are extracting the version specifically, so 5.5.52. And if we are receiving some kind of SNMP traps, again, this can be quite simple. So we provide specifically the OID that we are looking for in this SNMP trap. So the 231.1, oh, they haven't actually changed the print screen. I will write this down for myself. I need to change it. So in a good way, we would provide 231.1.7, and that we are looking for the string specifically. And again, we would return only the text this time. So specifically, yep, I see already in the chat someone is writing that the last regex is wrong. Yep, it is wrong, and I will report that this line needs to be changed. But still, again, thank you for actually following and observing. And JSON path. So the JSON path, since the JSON is closer, I would say, to coding itself, as you can quite obviously see that. And let's see where we're going. We are going to the store to find ourselves some books, and we are interested how much actually the first book costs. So since it's JSON closer to the code, we write not 1 for the first value, but 0 for the first value. And we are defining that in terms of the value we're retrieving in one go, we only want to go to the store for the first book, and we want to know specifically the price of the first book, and the Zabbix would get the floating number, the 8.95. Then we have .store.bicycle, and that means now we're going to the, again, store, and it's the whole level, and specifically for the bicycle path, as you can see it here, and we will retrieve everything that is associated with the bicycle and is at that JSON path level. And what about XML, or specifically the XPath that is used for pre-processing of XML? Well, again, I would say XPath presumably is a bit further from coding. So we do provide a bit different things here. But we also can do a bit more here, like, for example, we can actually calculate the sum, we can count the values, or we can even find a specific number, as it was with JSON. So if we do provide sum that we can provide, so I want to know what is the total sum of all the prices for all the books in our bookstore. And XPath would make Zabbix basically calculate that value. Or other way around, I want to calculate all the books in the bookstore. So I want to count them. And 1, 2, 3 books, and Zabbix would return 3. And with the number, we would look for a specific number. And in this case, I want to know if there is a price below 30 for a book in a bookstore. And then it would find the only price, in our case, the $29.99, and would store this value specifically in the database. So nothing too hard here. And of course, in terms of JSON path, you can find a lot in our documentation. In terms of regular expressions and in terms of XML and XPath, there will be also links provided that you can use to test out where you will be going and, well, if you will get lost in the bookstore. Then we have throttling. And the throttling functionality allows us to gather values basically from devices and applications as frequently as we want. So basically we can check them, well, let's say every second, which is, well, I don't know if we would, but in terms of database and spacing and throttling, we could, since the database will be written to the database only and specifically at the moment where the data, when the data has changed. What happens to the values that are being collected while unchanged? Well, they're basically being ignored by Zabbix, or you could even say they are being dropped. They aren't saved as historical data. They don't have any impact on the triggers, except, well, maybe no data, since, well, if you have no data and no data expects some values to arrive, as you know, and the values aren't there, they aren't arriving, so of course it will trigger, since they're based on historical values. And if there's no history, then there means no data, and that means triggers should fire. So pay attention to that and don't create no data triggers for items that have a heartbeat preprocessing step configured for them. Or, of course, if you use a discard with a heartbeat, and with a heartbeat, it's like with a proxy, basically. It changes from time, it checks time from time. If something that we check with a heartbeat is, well, actually still alive, so we can be more calm about what is going on. And let's take a look how it looks like. We'll do that just in a slide. So use cases, again, high frequency monitoring. So we want to know, for example, if something is up, and we want to know if it's up constantly. We just create this item, make it as often as we seem fit, and it will allow us to know the actual status while saving space on the disk. And if we are using also discard with a heartbeat, we will have usable graphs for that. Let's say we do use dependent metrics, then the master item can be, for example, each 10 seconds, which is quite often, and then create a dependent metric with 60 seconds and make it a throttling with a heartbeat to actually see a graph of the changes over time. There is a throttling example which we can take a look at and see how actually it is working. So we check the item each 5 seconds in the column right here, so discard and changed, and we have also in a near column discard and change with a heartbeat 30 seconds. So the heartbeat is executed every 30 seconds. Now let's take a look. So the first one is 0. We don't receive values on the next check because, well, the checks are actually the same, and that works for both of pre-processing steps. Heartbeat. Then, as you can see, there's quite a lengthy number of pre-processing steps, and now we are seeing the data validation ones. Data validation has multiple options, specifically 6. We will take a look at some of them. So what kind of options? It's of course in range. So you provide some kind of range in which the value should be, and everything else is irregular, should be discarded. Matches regular expression, so something must match a regular expression or be discarded, for example. There are actually more things you can do. So does not match regular expression, check for error in our JSON or XML, and of course check for errors using regex. I see someone writes that he lost the sound for a moment. I'm hoping it's a short moment. So now let's take a look at let's take a look at what happened if failed. That's interesting. Shouldn't be disconnected because I didn't actually have any connection issues. I will take a note of that. Thank you guys for letting me know. Just to return to that, so we have a data validation, and there are multiple options like check if it's in specific range, matches regular expression, doesn't matches, check for errors, and check for errors using regex. And let's take a look at what exactly can we do depending on what is happening. So what we can do? We can, of course, define what should be the range, and if, let's say, it's not in the range, we will get some kind of default error message. Not maybe very useful, but still we at least won't be collecting something that we shouldn't be seeing. Then we can add an additional option by putting a tick in custom on fail square, as you can see it right here in all 4 examples. And then we'll have some options to choose from. So discard the value, set value to, or set error to. Well, discard the value, you can guess it, it will just discard the value, and we won't even ever know that it got to us at some point. Because we expect that the value should be in some specific range. We can set this value to something specific because maybe we know what does that value, custom value actually means, and we want to keep it for the statistics, but we just want it to look something specifically. And then we can define a custom error message in case this happens. So we can see that, hey, there's actually a misreadings, let's say, in the temperature itself. Then we have the JavaScript. So you can actually create your own custom JavaScript code, a script that will make a pre-processing for you. The simplest example can be, for example, transforming temperature in Fahrenheit to Celsius, and it's exactly what you can see here in this example, right in this field. But there's a lot more that you can do. You can do transformation, you can do aggregation, you can make some specific filtering, add your own arithmetic and logic operations, and whatever you wish and need to do with the scripts. Like you see in the example here, for example, you can convert Apache statuses from the Apache status page, if you ever used it, and actually collect values from it by transforming it into JSON as a master item. So basically the master item, the JavaScript that collects the values from the Apache status page and converts them to JSON. And then you can use JSON preprocessing steps on dependent items to extract the values and again keep the actual numbers only in the database without having to keep all the output of the Apache status page. And saving you, well, a lot, well, maybe not a lot, but in the long run, of course, a lot of space in the database, plus making it much more comfortably to read what exactly is happening with your Apache status page and what values are being collected. The next thing, the next big thing is the LLD, which in 5.0 supports the pre-processing. And we can actually select some of the steps that we already seen for the usual items and use them in terms of low-level discoveries, in terms of specific pre-processing steps. So what kind of? Well, let's take a look. We can use regular expressions to, for example, extract something specific and assign it as JSON. We can use, of course, the JavaScript again to make it a bit different. Or let's say the Prometheus to JSON or whatever we need, but just basically we do something to convert it or to extract it something. And we will actually take a deeper look at the Prometheus example and how can you, for example, use Prometheus to JSON to actually extract Prometheus metrics, not just all the Prometheus page. And in terms of HTTP agent and JavaScript, support of those enables the ability to perform the discovery without the need to actually use external scripts. So basically you have something that you want to be processed in JSON and you just create your own JavaScript that will convert this something, let's say it's some kind of text format to the JSON, and you will be doing it through the Zabbix without actually creating your own shell or Python scripts. I see some questions that I'm just figuring out. I should have answered them now, but we will answer them. Sorry, I will answer them after we will be done with the slides, of course. And the Prometheus. So if you maybe didn't go that deep in preprocessing yet, or maybe you haven't used Prometheus, that Zabbix can now actually preprocess the Prometheus patterns to get the actual values without having to get all the HTTP output that Prometheus produces. And that helps you a lot since there's a lot of, for example, different exporters in Prometheus that can collect metrics for you. The storage ones, the hardware related one, OS related one, database related one, which will extract something specific. And what exactly you can find, of course, in the exporter description page, since it's most it's related to Prometheus directly and exporter. So but the thing you need to know that the actual output of the Prometheus and the Prometheus exporters looks like this. It's not all. I would say it's about 1/10 of what it actually outputs. And as you can see, it's, well, it is readable, of course, but it's not very comfortably readable, I would say. So we can see, of course, what is the disk-free bytes for specific volumes, what is the service state of the HCP, and what is the devices flow in terms of user SVC. So a lot of them, and we see all of them at once, and zeros, for example, say that it's not the current status, and one says this is the current status. So again, you need to look a lot to get what you're needing, and you most surely want to get, for example, the state running instead of getting all 5 states and then looking at them thoroughly, trying to find that one, and so on. So how can you do that with Zabbix itself? In case, just to mention, you don't know why to use Prometheus. Prometheus is quite good to monitor your own smaller services or applications that you are actually using or have created. But back to the Prometheus preprocessing. So let's say we want to know what is the CPU usage system and we want to see the specific number. With an item, usual item, it will be quite simple. So we basically create an HTTP item that will parse the Prometheus page for everything that is in that page. And then we define a preprocessing steps, choosing Prometheus pattern and selecting specific parameter that we are looking for. In custom fail, discard value if we don't see this parameter. And we will be getting not all this line, of course, but specific number, and we will be storing only the number in the database of ours. So again, what is the data flow? Basically, we have a Prometheus exporter which, well, exports values, exports data metrics from something that we are interested in. Maybe our HA proxy, maybe the database, whatever this database is. Then we add an HTTP check to actually parse the page where Prometheus exporter exports and provides the view of the data it exports. Then for that HTTP check, we create an preprocessing step, for example, the Prometheus pattern, and we will get into the database, into the history of the database only and specifically what we are looking for, not all the page that we parse. So did I miss anything? No. And then we have, of course, the Zabbix 4.2 with all its changes that were added. There were added, of course, quite more in the 5.0, but in 4.2, the main thing that was added, it was added the preprocessing possibility for the proxy itself. So before 4.2, proxy could not execute preprocessing, and all the preprocessing was made only on the Zabbix server side. Now you can actually save some resources of your Zabbix server by making the proxy calculate and make the preprocessing steps you are looking for. And how does that happen and how does that work? So basically the raw data is going to the proxy preprocesses it and then sends to the server already the preprocessed value, and this preprocessed value is getting to the database of our Zabbix server, again saving us not only this time some storage space but also the calculation, a small, but again, if you have a lot of preprocessing, maybe not a small segment of the calculation of the Zabbix server itself. So basically, for example, if we do have a lot of preprocessing that is being performed on the proxy side, this can convert, for example, to proxy collecting 1 million values per second. Of course, not one proxy, but the load across the proxies. And to the Zabbix server, we actually send in the end 10,000 values per second. So you can save 100 times of values that the Zabbix server needs to calculate and to, well, push to the database after it receives them. Then we have preprocessing. So preprocessing on the proxy side, and the advantages, well, improve Zabbix server performance again, since you are uploading preprocessing to the proxies. And if you use proxy and throttling, you are able to execute the high frequency monitoring, saving a lot of resources, since you are basically providing them all the calculation, all the collection of the metrics to the proxies themselves, and Zabbix only needs to analyze the data then and, well, store whatever is received in the end to the database. It doesn't need to collect the values themselves or make any preprocessing steps. Another great thing is now you can actually test the preprocessing steps. So before, how was it? Let's say in 4.0, you add the preprocessing step to the item, save the item, and then just, well, wait until the item tries to collect the data and hope it doesn't fail, and hoping that you have actually made the correct order of preprocessing steps and all of them function correctly. Now you can actually use a test and create preprocessing steps, click on the test and see, for example, what will be received in the end and will it work at all. Again, saving you, well, quite some time in terms of waiting until the item actually updates. Of course, you could reload the cache, you could have checked now the item, but still it took more time than just actually using the test. So some useful links that you can, of course, and probably will use for all your, not all your preprocessing, but for these types of preprocessing like XPath or PSRE. And of course, the wiki page of the testing of preprocessing, so you can actually test how it works and if it will actually work and return something that you are specifically looking for. So time for our questions. Of course, I need to describe the services themselves. So and the technical support, make sure if you need any technical support, contact our technical team and we will help you any time of day and night. Professional training, we do provide it. We do provide it for, we soon will be providing for 5.0. And of course, additionally, we do provide it online since, well, you know the things. We do provide the upgrade possibility, remote upgrade in terms if you're not sure how to process your system in terms and the state it is currently in. So the development, hire Zabbix to develop any additional features you might need for your business and your monitoring. Integrations in terms of integrations with different systems, service desks, or any other tools you might have. Remote troubleshooting, so we can and would happily assist you in terms of remotely solving the problems for you. Template building. We can actually create a template for your own unique, maybe device, maybe system, maybe application or services. Turnkey solution. So maybe you want a turnkey Zabbix, basically a Zabbix that you just, I would say, plug and play. Well, that's also absolutely possible. Then the turnkey, then the consulting, of course, to gain the benefit from, well, experts and advice, or just talk through some things that you're interested in. Also, would like to mention that we do hope that at the autumn everything will be fine, beautiful, and as we all used to. So, and we are planning our Zabbix Summit on October 30, October 31. There will be a lot of people. There will be, of course, all the Zabbix team, all the Zabbix community, developers, and you will, of course, be able to talk to each one of us about any questions you're interested in. And of course, the thing that we all are interested together, the Zabbix itself. You'll be able to learn the real use cases and get all your questions answered. And of course, there will be different workshops, probably, and including the exams, for example, themselves. If you want to request a more thorough demo about each part of Zabbix, or just view it, you can, of course, go to our page, use the link that you see in the slides to view the actual demo of the Zabbix. If it's the first time you're hearing about Zabbix, or request a live demo to go through with the engineer through any aspect of Zabbix more thoroughly if you are interested in, of course, finding out more. So let's get to the questions while I will be collecting your emails with, of course, that are requested, the slides. So Zabbix Agent 2 can monitor several databases. You could do that even with Zabbix Agent 1, but that's not really the efficient way to do it. So I'm a bit confused. Why would you like to do it through the agent? I think ODBC would be much more efficient way to actually monitor the databases, especially multiple ones. So take a look at the ODBC option. Is there a way to retrieve multiple values? What do you mean multiple values? In case of one item, you can retrieve even a whole page of values. But do you really need it and want to keep it in the database? The right option would be to create an item which retrieves multiple values, and then for that item you create dependent items which will extract with a pre-processing step different multiple specific values. So each dependent item will have its own pre-processing step, and with its own pre-processing step it will extract different values. Can Zabbix collect via UDP, so you can just send values to Zabbix without waiting to receive confirmation, without using the SNMP trap? You can use SNMP get for that, if I understand the question correctly. So, but you cannot basically just spam Zabbix with SNMP. Well, you can spam, of course, the server with SNMP trap if it accepts the connection data, but still in the Zabbix you would need to create items that will process those values. But if you don't want to wait for UDP, you can try to make checks through SNMP get and agents, and then just bulk request or use Zabbix sender. Presentation will be available after webinar, so just don't forget to leave your email. Is there a way to use Zabbix built-in function to check LDAP? I'm actually not quite sure about I do think you mean the Active Directory bin, and what do you mean to check? You can actually use the LDAP in Zabbix to authenticate and use the specific bin domain name. Disk space is cheap. Why do we care about using it? Well, it's not only about the disk space, of course. It was just one of the options. But again, if you are collecting thousands of metrics per second, and well, your database will be, of course, growing quite fast. And even though you can buy, I don't know, SSD drives, multiple terabytes, and so on, still, don't forget that no matter how fast the drives, the bigger your Zabbix is, the more values are coming in, the more you need to see, the more you need to request from Zabbix to read, and so on, the more your database is loaded. And well, the bigger the database, the slower it gets read, even if you have top-notch SSDs. Eventually, it might be growing too big. But if you know how to optimize the database, if you, of course, know not only how to optimize the database, but how to keep only the essential values, and you know how to control the growth of the database, well, you might not care about the space itself, but you still want to receive the precise values, not just, well, walls of text and then the look through this wall of text to find a specific value. How heavy is on CPU this preprocessing? It is absolutely not heavy, but again, if you have thousands of values that you are preprocessing each, well, in short intervals, then it can become heavy. It all depends on the actual load of and usage, of course, of the preprocessing itself. So let me just, so yes, you meant specifically monitoring the bind. Yes, you can actually check the LDAP service availability, and you can monitor open LDAP cluster. You can, of course, let me check what else can you actually monitor and think. But basically, you can monitor the LDAP status for sure. So question, I'm wondering if you do preprocessing and not write the, oops, sorry. The question jumped. I'm wondering if you do preprocessing and not write down the unchanged value. Zabbix would, for example, know how to read it from the database, but for example, Grafana would display gaps in the graphs. Sorry if I misunderstood. No, you understood actually correctly. So if you are using discard values without a heartbeat, then yes, there will be gaps in the graphs. That's why it's a good idea to use, if you need the graphs themselves, to use discard with a heartbeat, since heartbeat will be basically the thing that will be connecting those dots in the graph together, making them a whole perfectly readable graph without actually having to see gaps in them. How is the recording going to be available? I actually don't know. I know some of the recordings of the webinars are available through our webpage, so you might probably find it there. But yeah, we decided to transfer our webinars to Zoom because, well, the quality was much better. And, well, you actually, with your own words, all of you guys, confirmed our suspicions, and we do plan to stay on Zoom for now. Can Zabbix do checks of devices connected via serial? You mean serial port? Well, the thing is, you need to make Zabbix actually. You need to find something that will be reporting to Zabbix via some kind of IP, some kind of interface. So if you find a device that these serials will be plugged in and can be read from, then yeah, in a way you can. Are you doing United States summits in fall 2020? A good question. I would recommend to address it to the sales team because I myself don't know about the US summits, but we do hope that in fall we will be able to do it. Since for now, well, it is quite, well, you know, it is quite hard to get to, well, basically any other location than your own home. Well, there is a question about offload. How about to perform preprocessing entirely from Elastic Stack to output to Zabbix? Well, this will require additional software, and in this case, you can do everything through the Zabbix itself. So why? And preprocessing doesn't take that much resources, so I don't know if this is well, quite a good idea. When the proxy executes the preprocessing, does it send just the values for the dependent items directly? Well, in terms of how the dependent master items work, well, that's actually a good question. Let me rethink that. Well, overall, dependent items are the same as the master item, if you remember. So basically, it will be sending only one and the only item, and then the preprocessing. I think they changed it. Should happen, and only the values for dependent items should be sent. What are the limitations for the JavaScript that is in the processing? Are we able to import libraries? No, unfortunately, you are not able. And in terms of limitations, the duct tape is used, duct tape JavaScript engine, so you can visit ducttape.org to see what is the limitations basically. So guys, if it's all with the questions, I think we can finish on. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. I really absolutely do. And oopsie, well, I still need to stop sharing. And if you have any additional questions, you can of course try to forward them to our team. I do want to thank you for participating, for being here with me all this time. I see someone praising Zoom, and thank you. Well, I hope that it will be a better for everyone. And since you are using Linux, yeah, Webex had a lot of issues with Linux itself. So I will be collecting the emails now. Again, guys, very much thank you. I do see a lot of thanks and enjoyment, as I suppose. So see you guys on the other webinars. Yeah, there was actually a bit crying. So the issues, the problems that you encounter working from home, occasionally they do happen. But well, thankfully it didn't disrupt the webinar for you, and well, essentially everything's okay. Don't need to rush for a bottle.